Hello and welcome to this video on my recently purchased Saab 900 NG 2 litre 16 valve turbo coupe. So first of all, let's rewind the clocks back to the mid to late 80s. Saab were not in the best financial condition and General Motors wanted to add a premium brand to their portfolio. A deal was done in 1989 where General Motors took a 50% share in Saab. So the car that you see here today, the NG900 or new generation 900, was actually born out of that partnership. This car is actually heavily based on a Vauxhall Cavalier Mark III, which was produced between 1988 and 1995. Many of the components, including the suspension, the steering rack, the chassis and the brakes, basically all come from General Motors. So basically what happened in the early 90s, Saab were given this platform off General Motors and they reworked it and they changed a number of items on it. So what I'm going to do is take the camera off the tripod and we'll get into it in a bit more detail.
Okay, so 20 years ago I owned a white 900S Coupe Turbo. Ever since I got rid of it, I always wanted another. They've always been on my radar. And I was looking on Facebook Marketplace to add another car to my collection, and this came up 5 miles from home. So I arranged a visit and a deal was done, and obviously now I'm the proud owner of this new generation 900 2 litre turbo. It's 185 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 194 foot-pound of torque at 2,100 RPM. When it was new, it was approximately 22 to 23,000 pounds. It's had one owner from 1994 to around about 2017, and then the second owner for the last few years. The second owner has actually known the car since it was new, which is quite interesting, and he used to be a Saab specialist. It has had a partial respray. It really is mechanically sound. It's quite solid underneath as well. In the future it will need attention in certain places, but I don't mind. I'm just happy to have saved it, and I don't mind putting the work in to keep it going. It's unmistakably a Saab, even though it is obviously based on a Vauxhall Cavalier, as I previously mentioned. The turbo badge on the front, it was still quite a big deal in the early 90s to have a turbocharged engine in a car. It wasn't as mainstream as what it has become now. This was a particularly fast car as well for the early 90s. Doesn't sound fast by today's standards, but you're looking at 8 seconds to 60, a top speed of 143, and exceptional in-gear acceleration 40 to 60. That's what it was marketed as, a safe overtaking car. It's incredibly original, with the exception of the wheels. So the wheels are off a later car. They are the correct wheels for a 900. They're just off a later car. I wouldn't mind sourcing the correct launch wheels for it. In terms of rust, there is very little rust. The underfloor floor pan is in excellent condition. There are a few bits and bobs over the next few years which I'm sure I'll need attention. So this is the SE model, as denoted by the badge on the back. And I fitted a Jetix exhaust to it because the original exhaust didn't suit the car. It looked particularly bad, so that's a nice subtle modification. Whilst I did that, I also fitted a performance element air filter just in the original airbox. It's still relatively quiet, but I'm happy with that. I don't want to make a noise with it. I think the car has aged very well over the last 29 to 30 years, and undoubtedly it will be a classic. But quite regularly these are looked second when it comes to the 900. A lot of people prefer the classic 900 that came before. Obviously, I grew up in the early 90s, and I remember these cars new. Obviously, I've owned one in the past, and it just had to be one of these, as much as I do like the classic 900. Doesn't it look good? The only signs of wear inside the interior are just on the driver's seat there, where it's worn away, because it's done 153,000 miles. But I think you'll agree, it's actually wearing those miles particularly well. It's a hard wearing interior. It's got cruise control. It's got the traditional Saab key entry and reverse gear lock. I'm still forgetting where to put the key, and I even go to the wrong place to take the key out, because obviously I don't drive this car every day. It's the high output turbo, which means it has got the turbo gauge just on the top right there. It's also got the upgraded SID, so you get the full functionality on it. And it's got the climate control air conditioning system. It's a lovely car to drive. It is apparent that it's based on a Vauxhall Cavalier, because I've owned a Calibre in the past, and it is most definitely, you can tell that it's based on that vehicle. For a coupe, there's an incredible amount of room in it. I'll open the boot after we've had a look under the bonnet, and I'll show you how cavernous the boot is. So you've got three 3-point belts as well, which a lot of cars of period did not have. Windscreen wipers, well, not windscreen wipers, but wipers for the headlights, and they are glass headlights as well. So let's get the bonnet open and have a look under the bonnet. Okay, so doesn't look perfect. They all seem to do this. The rocker covers all do this. So there's our turbocharger. There's no heat shield on the early ones. So essentially what happens is the turbocharger gets incredibly hot, and then the paint peels off the cover, but that's easy enough to fix. This was Saab's Trionic 5 engine management system, which was an incredibly powerful system in the early 90s. I have removed the bulkhead material to inspect all the mountings to the steering rack. I can report back everything's fine. It didn't look particularly attractive either, so I think it looks better now showing the red. The pipe here, I've cleaned that up. It's not come up perfect, but it's come up pretty well. It's got the original sound deadening material on the bonnet there. The gearbox is incredibly slick and smooth. The engine pulls beautifully, really does. ABS is standard. It's a 5-speed gearbox. So to get into the boot, we've got a button just here. That opens the boot. A massive selling point of this car is the size of the boot. It really is large. So here's a bottle of water, 700 ml or whatever it is.
that is a really large boot. It's deep and it's long, and you've got a hatch there as well. Now, a number of years ago, I had to transport a large amount of stuff in my 900. I could not believe how much I could get in it when I took the seats down. It's all solid. I've got the original warning triangle, which has been Velcroed. Solid where it needs to be solid. It's an absolute pleasure to drive. It really is. I mean, when was the last time you saw an L-Reg one of these? I've not seen one. I see P-Regs, R-Regs, the odd M-Reg. I don't think I've even seen an M-Reg recently. Hello, you join me out on the open road? Unfortunately, I know this phone holder is going to make a bit of a racket, but it's the best I've got at the minute. So let's just see how this car performs out on the open road then. That's second gear, pulling nice and strong into third, then into fourth, and fifth. So doing about 60 mile an hour, we're talking, I don't know, 2,300 RPM. Got quite a twisty section of road coming up here, so it'll be interesting to see how it handles that. It's very quiet on the interior, not a lot of wind noise, not a lot of engine noise. As regards to boost, the standard boost on this engine is 0.79 bar. So it's mild at best, highly tunable. However, I'm happy with the way it is. We've got a twisty section here, so we break down a fair old bit, put it into third, keep the turbo spooling. Now we'll hold it in third through this section of corners. Feels surprisingly compliant. So we've got McPherson struts up the front and rear beam on the back. Going into a nice straight road now, so we're in third gear. There we go, pulls hard. A little bit of torque here. Absolutely no hesitation whatsoever. Very strong engine. So I do plan to get it on the rolling road imminently, because I'm highly interested to see what the horsepower is. I don't believe it's lost any. We're coming up to a section of road that drops into a 40. Quite regularly you do get police camera vans down here, so they're going to be very sensible. Yeah, once the turbo spools in, performance is incredibly satisfying on this car. Tell you what, it's turned out to be a really warm day today inside the car. We've got discs all around. Braking is no such issue. If I was going to entertain any track use, which I'm probably not, obviously I'd have to change the fluid and the pads and the lines, to be honest with you. It's a lovely car to drive slowly, but it's also incredibly nice to get a shift on. And I actually do like how quiet it is. You can hear the turbo spooling, but it's not loud. anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, if you could like it and potentially subscribe, there will be more videos in the future. I'm going to do a few more on this one. If I do take it to a rolling road, that will be documented as well.